It was a rainy night in New York City. Thunder rolled above the skyline, and the storm outside seemed to echo the storm about to erupt in Charlotte Lopez's life. Inside St. Mary's Hospital, the hallways smelled of antiseptic, sharp and cold. Nurses hurried past in white coats, voices urgent, shoes squeaking against the floor. And in the operating theater, Charlotte Lopez stood with gloved hands, beads of sweat dripping under her mask. "Dr. Lopez, the patient is still hemorrhaging," a nurse cried. Charlotte's eyes narrowed with determination. "Scalpel. We can still save her." Her hands did not tremble. For years, she had been praised as one of the most promising young obstetricians in the city. Sharp, brilliant, compassionate. Every mother who walked through those doors trusted her. But tonight, fate was cruel. The baby's heart had already stopped beating long before the mother was brought in. And no matter how hard she fought, no matter how desperately she tried, nothing could bring that little life back. When the silence of the monitors confirmed it, the mother's scream pierced the air like shattered glass. "You killed my child." "Amelia." Stone's voice was shrill, hysterical, laced with grief and rage. She reached for Charlotte, her nails clawing at the air. "Murderer! You wanted my baby dead." Charlotte froze for a single second. She had heard grief before, heard mothers sobbing, husbands, cursing, families breaking. But this voice was different. This voice was familiar. And then she heard another voice, low, cold. The one man she thought she could trust. "Amelia, calm down." Charlotte turned, and her world collapsed. There he was, Marcus Reed, her husband, standing by Amelia's side. His hand was resting on Amelia's trembling shoulder, like he belonged there. Marcus, Charlotte whispered, her mask slipping down, revealing the disbelief on her face. "Why are you here?" "Why?" "With her." Amelia's tears glittered in the harsh hospital light. "Marcus, tell her. Tell this woman how she destroyed us. She took our child from us. You can't let her walk away." The room seemed to shrink around Charlotte. "Our child." She choked. Her gaze darted from Amelia's pale face to Marcus's guilty silence. "No. Don't tell me." Marcus avoided her eyes. "Charlotte, I was going to tell you." But her breath caught in her throat. Betrayal stabbed sharper than any scalpel. Her husband. The man she had stood beside for 7 years. The man she had defended through every failure, every weakness. The man she had loved more than her own career. And here he was, with another woman. A woman pregnant with his child. No had been pregnant with his child. Marcus, Charlotte's voice shook with fury and disbelief. "All these years, you told me you couldn't be with women, that something was wrong with you. I searched for doctors' therapies, specialists for 5 years. And yet, you—" Her hands trembled. "You made a child with her." Amelia smirked through her tears, cruelty flickering in her eyes. "Some people don't deserve to be wives. Some people can't give men what they need. Isn't that right, Marcus?" "Enough, Amelia," Marcus muttered, but the damage was already done. Charlotte staggered back, her chest tightening. Everything she thought she knew about her marriage and life was shattered into pieces too sharp to pick up. Charlotte listened. Marcus tried again, his voice flat and almost rehearsed. "I'll be filing for divorce. It's over. Amelia and we're together now. It's better this way." Her vision blurred with hot tears, but Charlotte stood tall. "Better for whom? You humiliate me in my own hospital, destroy my reputation, and now you want to walk away. Don't make this more complicated than it has to be." His eyes were cold, unrecognizable. "Sign the papers, Charlotte. You'll leave with nothing. Her heart cracked. Nothing. After all the years she had sacrificed working double shifts, paying his debt, standing by him, when he was too weak, too cowardly to face the world, he wanted to discard her like a broken instrument. The nurses avoided her eyes. The world seemed to tilt. And then the final blow came. A hospital administrator, pale and nervous, stepped forward. Dr. Lopez, after tonight's incident, after offending the Stone family, we can no longer keep you employed at St. Mary's. I'm sorry. You're dismissed effective immediately. Dismissed, fired, stripped of everything. Charlotte's knees weakened, but she did not fall. Not yet. Her husband had betrayed her. Her career was stolen from her. Her reputation was ruined. And her hand, her precious surgeon's hand, injured in the scuffle, throbbed with pain so sharp she wondered if she would ever hold a scalpel again. For a moment she wanted to scream, to collapse, to disappear. But deep inside a small spark remained, a whisper that told her this was not the end, not yet. That night, as Charlotte left the hospital for the last time, rain poured over the city. Neon lights blurred in the puddles at her feet. She clutched her coat tighter, her heart breaking, but her spine unyielding. She had lost everything. But perhaps fate had stripped her bare so it could clothe her in something greater. And across the ocean of betrayal and despair, destiny was waiting. A destiny wearing the face of Joseph Hall, the ruthless billionaire who would soon turn her world upside down. The morning after the storm, New York seemed strangely quiet. The skyline gleamed as though nothing had happened, but the city no longer looked identical to Charlotte Lopez. Her apartment was small, tucked into the corner of Brooklyn, and it felt colder than usual. The silence inside pressed against her ribs. She had returned from St. Mary's with only a broken heart, a bruised hand wrapped in bandages, and a single suitcase of belongings she had already packed, in fear that Marcus might throw her out. On the kitchen table lay the divorce papers he had sent over, neat, clinical, ruthless. She had stared at them all night, but hadn't signed. The ink waited like a silent betrayal. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an old colleague who dared to risk helping her. Charlotte, I know what happened. I can't say much, but listen carefully. Hall Global Corporation is looking for a personal therapist for Mrs. Hall. The salary is enormous. Apply. Please take it. This is your chance. She frowned at the name, Hall Global. Everyone in America knew it. It was more than a corporation. It was an empire. And at the heart of it stood Joseph Hall. He was whispered about on Wall Street, feared in Washington, envied by every tycoon in Silicon Valley. He was said to have built his empire in less than a decade, crushing rivals with elegance and precision. Ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. Charlotte knew his face from magazines. Cold blue eyes, sharp jaw, and aura made the most affluent families tremble. A man who belonged to skyscrapers and private jets, not to someone like her. Yet the message kept echoing in her head. Salary enormous. Apply. Please take it. She thought of her mother. Alone in a Los Angeles nursing home, the bills piled higher than the city's towers. Her mother's soft voice on the phone last week, tired but gentle. Don't worry about me, baby. Just take care of yourself. Charlotte swallowed hard. She had nothing left to lose. The Hall estate was nothing like she had ever seen. On the outskirts of Manhattan, beyond heavy iron gates, a world that seemed carved from another universe stretched. Marble fountains shimmered in the sun. Gardens bloomed with imported roses, each petal more expensive than her rent. The mansion rose like a palace, glass and steel gleaming against the sky. As Charlotte stepped out of the taxi, her heart thumped. She adjusted her plain black dress, the best she had, after selling most of her wardrobe, and clutched the thin folder of her credentials. Other women stood around her, waiting in the courtyard. And they were not ordinary. Each wore designer gowns, diamonds glistening at their ears, their hair styled by the city's finest salons. They looked at Charlotte the way predators looked at prey. "Excuse me." One of them sneered, a tall blonde with icy eyes. "Are you lost? The servants' entrance is back there." Charlotte's cheeks heated, but she lifted her chin. "I'm here for the same reason as you." The blonde laughed, tossing her hair. "Darling Hall Global is not for charity cases. This is for real candidates." Another girl giggled. "She doesn't even have heels. Look at those shoes, second-hand maybe." Their laughter rang cruelly, but Charlotte forced herself to breathe. She had faced worse. She had faced death in operating rooms. She had faced betrayal in marriage. Their insults were nothing. Inside the mansion, the tension thickened. The applicants were gathered in a grand hall with high ceilings that felt like stepping into a cathedral. Chandeliers rained light down like fire. A line of staff moved silently, arranging chairs in a long row. At the far end of the hall, a tall man entered. His presence was colder than the marble beneath their feet. Joseph Hall. He was taller than the photographs suggested, his tailored suit cutting sharp lines across his frame. His hair was dark, his eyes glacial blue, scanning the room with the precision of a predator. Every woman in the room straightened, painted smiles flashing like weapons. But Joseph didn't seem to see them, or rather, he saw through them as though nothing could impress him. 10 minutes, his voice echoed low and commanding. "Convince me why you deserve to be here." One by one, the women stepped forward. "I graduated from Harvard Medical School. I have experience as a private nurse for the governor's wife. I studied holistic therapy in Paris." Their words were polished, rehearsed, heavy with prestige. When it was Charlotte's turn, the room hushed. She stepped forward, feeling the weight of every eye. "My name is Charlotte Lopez," she said softly but steadily. "I was an obstetrician at St. Mary's Hospital. I don't have diamonds or titles to show you, but I know how to fight for a life when everyone else gives up." The silence lingered. For a moment, Joseph's gaze locked on hers. It was only a flicker, but Charlotte felt it burn through her skin. Then he turned away. "Enough. I've made my decision." Whispers erupted. Surely he would choose the blonde heiress, the woman with Parisian certificates, or someone equally dazzling. But his hand lifted, pointing across the hall. "You, Charlotte Lopez." Gasps broke the room. Charlotte froze. "Me." Joseph's eyes narrowed. "Do you see anyone else by that name?" Her heart pounded as the others erupted in protest. "This is outrageous. She has nothing. She's nobody." But Joseph's tone cut through the noise, steel and ice. "My decision is final. The rest of you may leave." The women stormed out one by one, their heels clacking against marble. The blonde shot Charlotte a glare sharp enough to wound. Charlotte stood trembling, her hands clutching the folder to her chest. Joseph stepped closer. His presence was suffocating, overwhelming. She felt like prey trapped under the gaze of a hawk. "You'll start immediately," he said. "Mrs. Hall requires therapy twice a day. You'll live here. My assistant will show you to your quarters." Charlotte blinked. "Live here in this palace? But—" Her voice faltered. "I thought this was only an interview." He cut her off. "You thought wrong. I don't waste time. You've been chosen. Accept it." His words were absolute, leaving no room for refusal. Her instinct screamed to walk away, to run from this man who radiated danger with every breath. But another voice whispered louder. "Your mother, her hospital bills. Her life depends on this." So Charlotte bowed her head slightly. "I understand, Mr. Hall." His gaze lingered on her face, as if he was measuring her skills and soul. Then he turned sharply and walked away, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and the command echo. That night, Charlotte was shown to a guest suite, larger than her entire apartment. The bed was silk. The balcony overlooked the city skyline, and the bathroom gleamed with marble. She stood by the window, her reflection fragile against the night. What had just happened? Only hours ago, she had been discarded, humiliated, left with nothing. And now she was inside the fortress of one of the world's most powerful men, chosen inexplicably by Joseph Hall himself. But why? She did not believe in coincidence. A man like him didn't make decisions based on whim. And as she lay down that night, staring at the ceiling too grand to belong to her, Charlotte whispered to herself, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." She did not yet know that this beginning would be more dangerous, passionate, and unpredictable than anything she had ever endured. Because Joseph Hall was not simply a billionaire. He was a storm in human form. And she had just stepped into its eye. The Hall mansion woke like a living organism. Charlotte's first morning inside its walls felt like stepping into a labyrinth woven of wealth and silence. The staff moved with mechanical precision, each step rehearsed, each word hushed. She could hear the echo of polished shoes across marble corridors, porcelain clinking in the breakfast hall, the faint hum of engines as luxury cars came and went beyond the gates. She had lived her whole life in the crowded chaos of Brooklyn. This world of crystal chandeliers and whispered commands seemed colder, sharper, like walking on ice. But Charlotte reminded herself why she was here. Her mother's face flashed before her eyes, her bills, her future. She had no room for fear. Still, she almost faltered when she walked into the dining hall and saw Joseph Hall at the far end of the long mahogany table. He didn't look up immediately. A newspaper lay open before him, his glass of black coffee steaming faintly. Even in the simplicity of the moment, he exuded a command that bent the air around him. "Good morning, Mr. Hall," Charlotte said softly, careful to keep her voice level. At last, his eyes lifted. That piercing blue gaze struck her with the same force as the night before. He studied her without expression, as though he could see every thought she was trying to hide. "You're late," he said. Her heart skipped. She checked her watch. It was exactly 7. I told my staff breakfast is at 6:30, he continued. "If you're to live under this roof, you will follow my schedule, not the city's clock." Heat rose to her cheeks. She had endured humiliation before, but something about his calm authority made the sting sharper. "Yes, Mr. Hall," she replied, swallowing her pride. He folded the newspaper, set it aside, and leaned back. "Sit." The chair across from him felt like a throne she had not earned. She perched on its edge, unsure whether to touch the plate of fruit arranged before her. He seemed to notice. "Eat." So she picked up a fork. Her fingers trembled. He said casually that Mrs. Hall's therapy begins at 10, as though their breakfast was a business meeting. "My assistant will bring you her records. You will review them thoroughly." "I understand." "And another thing." His gaze sharpened, pinning her in place. "From this moment, your name will not be questioned under my roof. Whatever lies you've heard or accusations were made against you in the past end here. Do you understand?" Charlotte blinked. Her lips parted, but no words came. Had he just defended her? "Yes, Mr. Hall." He returned to his coffee, as though nothing significant had been spoken. But Charlotte's chest burned with something unfamiliar, a flicker of safety, a promise she hadn't asked for. Later that day, she explored the estate's vast gardens. The roses were too perfect and polished, yet she found herself pausing before them, wondering how something so delicate survived in the shadow of such power. "Beautiful, aren't they?" a voice said behind her. Charlotte turned. A woman approached, tall, elegant, with hair like polished bronze. She wore a silk dress that whispered money with every movement. "I'm Clarissa Vale," the woman said, extending a manicured hand, a friend of Joseph's family. Charlotte hesitated before shaking it. Charlotte Lopez. Clarissa's smile was sweet but sharp, her eyes gliding over Charlotte's plain dress. Ah, yes, the new therapist. The word dripped with dismissal. Welcome, Clarissa, added, though her tone suggested anything but. Everyone deserves a chance, even unexpected choices. Charlotte felt the barb, but chose silence. She had no interest in sparring with strangers who saw her as competition. Yet Clarissa leaned closer, her perfume cloying. A small piece of advice, darling. Men like Joseph don't keep women like you for long. Enjoy your stay. It will be brief. With that, she glided away, leaving Charlotte alone among the roses that suddenly felt like knives. 2 days later, Charlotte accompanied Mrs. Hall, the elderly matriarch, to a routine checkup in the city. She walked alongside the older woman's wheelchair, steady and professional. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. In the lobby of the luxury medical center, she froze. Marcus Reed, Amelia Stone. They were there arm in arm, Amelia's smile radiant, as though she hadn't buried betrayal under Charlotte's skin. Marcus's eyes met Charlotte's, and for a moment, guilt flickered. Then it vanished, replaced by smug disdain. Well, Amelia's voice sliced through the air. Look who it is, the disgraced doctor. Charlotte's pulse hammered, but she kept her head high. I'm here on business. Business, Amelia laughed. As what? A servant? Oh, forgive me. A therapist. How noble. Mrs. Hall stirred in her chair, sensing the tension. Charlotte, who are these people? Before Charlotte could answer, Amelia bent down with mock sympathy. You should know. Madame, this woman is a fraud. She cost me my baby, and now she pretends to belong in places she never could. Charlotte's throat tightened. The old accusations. The same poison. And then a new voice. Deep. Cold. Enough. The lobby stilled. Joseph Hall's arrival was like a storm sweeping in his presence, silencing every whisper. He strode forward, eyes blazing with controlled fury. He stopped before Amelia and Marcus, his shadow falling over them. When you speak my employee's name, you will do so with respect, or you will not speak at all. Amelia paled. Mr. Hall, you misunderstand. I never misunderstood. Joseph cut in. His gaze was lethal. Charlotte Lopez is under my protection. Anyone who slanders her slanders me. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he dared not speak. Joseph turned to Charlotte, then his voice softer but no less commanding. Come. And just like that, he led her away, leaving the stunned whispers of the crowd in their wake. Back in the car, silence thickened. Charlotte stared out the window, her chest heaving. She hadn't asked for his defense, and yet the way he had spoken, the absolute certainty, the authority that crushed every lie, made her heart ache with gratitude she couldn't voice. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. His eyes flicked toward her, sharp and unreadable. Yes, I did. Why? For a moment, silence. Then, because loyalty is the rarest currency in my world, I repay it when I find it. Her breath caught. Was that what he saw in her loyalty? Or was it something else, something neither of them dared to name? Charlotte returned to her suite that evening, but sleep would not come. Her mind replayed the scene in the lobby. Joseph's voice like iron, the way the crowd had watched, the way Marcus had looked small for the first time. She had never been defended like that. Not by her husband. Not by anyone. And now, by Joseph Hall. A man she barely knew, but who seemed to command her fate with a single word. She touched her bandaged hand, whispering into the darkness. Who are you, Joseph Hall? Outside her window, the city glimmered. Somewhere in its heart, the billionaire sat in his private study, his gaze cold, his mind calculating. And yet, as he sipped his scotch, one thought refused to leave him. Her eyes. The eyes of Charlotte Lopez. They haunted him like fire beneath glass. The Hall estate glittered under the soft light of evening, a palace alive with both silence and whispers. For Charlotte Lopez, each day spent behind its walls felt like treading deeper into a dazzling and dangerous world. She had been inside the mansion for a week. Already she learned the rhythms of its endless corridors, the way servants bowed when Joseph Hall passed the way. Board members straightened in fear at the sound of his voice. But she also learned something else. Wealth could be colder than winter. The women who visited socialites draped in silk heiresses glittering in diamonds looked at her with the same disdain as Clarissa Vale had shown in the garden. Charlotte was not a doctor-therapist, or even a professional to them. She was an intruder, a stranger who had dared to stand near Joseph Hall, and they would not forgive it. The first trap came at a dinner. It was meant to be casual, just a gathering in the smaller dining hall, with Mrs. Hall present. Charlotte wore a simple navy dress borrowed from the mansion's wardrobe. She had no jewels, no designer labels, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. Clarissa was there, shimmering in emerald satin, her laughter echoing too loudly. She leaned close to Joseph as though she had known him all her life. "Joseph, you should have come to Paris last spring," she purred. "The gala was exquisite, and lonely without you." His reply was polite, but distant. "Business doesn't allow me that luxury." Clarissa's eyes flicked toward Charlotte, then her smile thinned. "Of course. You have a new company now." The table quieted. Charlotte felt every gaze. Her fingers tightened around her fork. "I'm here as Mrs. Hall's therapist," Charlotte said calmly, her voice steady, though her heart raced. But Clarissa laughed, tilting her glass of wine. "Therapist? My dear, you're seated at Joseph's right hand. That is hardly a servant's place." The words burned. Charlotte wanted to rise to escape. But before she could, Joseph's voice sliced the air. "Enough." He turned to Clarissa, his gaze sharp as ice. "Charlotte sits where I tell her to sit. If that offends you, the door is there." Silence crashed over the table. Clarissa's face stiffened, her pride wounded before the entire company. Charlotte's heart pounded. Once again he had defended her. But the sting of humiliation remained, because no matter how fiercely he protected her, she knew she didn't belong in his world of power and glass towers. Later that night, Charlotte found herself in the library, searching for peace among the towering shelves of leather-bound books. The door creaked open. Joseph entered his presence, filling the space like a storm. "You handled yourself well," he said. Charlotte shook her head. "I don't need defending Mr. Hall. I'm used to standing alone." His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her as though peeling back the layers of her soul. "Even the strongest walls crack under siege. Don't mistake stubbornness for strength." Her breath caught. Something in his tone, quiet, almost weary, suggested he knew the weight of isolation too well. For the first time, she wondered what Joseph Hall carried in his silence. The second trap came days later outside the mansion. Charlotte had entered the city to purchase medical supplies for Mrs. Hall's therapy. She walked the polished aisles of an exclusive boutique where she never would have entered. She intended only to buy what was needed and leave quickly. But fate was cruel. Amelia Stone was there. Her laughter rang out before Charlotte even saw her. Draped in designer silk, Amelia looked every inch the queen she believed herself to be. And beside her, Marcus Reed. Charlotte's chest tightened. She turned to leave, but Amelia's voice followed her like poison. "Well, look at this!" Amelia roared, drawing shoppers' attention. The disgraced doctor turned errand girl. Charlotte froze. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but Amelia pressed on her eyes glinting with malice. Tell me, Charlotte, does it sting? To see me wear the life you lost? To know Marcus chose me over you? Charlotte's hands trembled at her sides. She wanted to walk away. She wanted to be stronger than their cruelty. But the whispers around her, the stares, the familiar sting of false accusation, it was too much. Then a shadow fell across them. Joseph Hall. He had entered without her noticing, tall and commanding, his eyes burning like stormlight. Amelia Stone, he said, voice low. Dangerous. If you value your family's remaining dignity, you'll step away. Amelia blanched. Mr. Hall, I didn't mean. But Joseph moved closer, his height towering, his presence suffocating. You meant every word. But let me make myself clear. Charlotte Lopez is under my protection. The Stone Empire will not see another sunrise if you dare touch her name again. The silence was suffocating. Amelia's face drained of color. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Joseph took Charlotte's hand, then not gently, but firmly, as though declaring ownership before the world. Come, he commanded, and led her out of the boutique. Charlotte's pulse thundered. His grip was steady, unyielding, and though she wanted to pull away, something inside her refused. Back at the mansion, Charlotte confronted him. You can't keep doing this, she said, her voice trembling. You can't keep stepping in every time someone tries to humiliate me. Joseph stood before the window, city lights painting his silhouette. Why not? Because it makes it worse, she cried. It makes me look like I need saving, like I'm weak. He turned then, his gaze fierce. You think strength means bleeding in silence. You think dignity is letting wolves tear you apart while you pretend it doesn't hurt. Her breath caught. I don't protect you because you're weak. He continued, softer now. I protect you because you're mine. The word struck her like lightning. Mine. He said it with the conviction of a man who never let go of what he claimed. Charlotte's heart raced. I'm not yours, she whispered. For a moment, silence. His eyes searched hers, and she thought she saw a flicker, something raw, something lonely. But then his walls closed again. He turned back to the window, voice flat. Not yet. That night, Charlotte lay awake in her suite, staring at the ceiling. She hated the way his words lingered and made her heart tremble. She hated the way his touch still burned on her skin. And yet she could not deny it. Joseph Hall was not just a storm. He was gravity itself, pulling her, binding her, reshaping her world with every glance. But storms destroyed. Gravity crushed. She had to protect herself. She could not fall. Or so she told herself. Outside, beyond the mansion walls, Clarissa Vale whispered to Amelia Stone in a hidden corner of a rooftop bar. He's chosen her, Clarissa said, venom in her voice. But it won't last. A woman like Charlotte Lopez can't survive in Joseph's world. We'll make sure of it. Amelia smiled, cruel and triumphant. Then let's end her before she truly begins. And somewhere high in his glass tower, Joseph Hall stood alone, staring at the skyline he had conquered. But even as the city bowed to him, his thoughts betrayed him. They betrayed him with the memory of a woman's eyes, dark, defiant, and burning with pain and strength. Charlotte Lopez, the woman who was unraveling him. The Hall. Global Annual Gala was not merely an event, it was a spectacle. Every year, New York's elite gathered beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Metropolitan Grand, where diamonds shone brighter than the stars outside, and whispers of billion-dollar deals swirled between champagne glasses. Politicians, celebrities, foreign royals, all came, all bowed their heads in the presence of Joseph Hall. For Charlotte Lopez, it was a battlefield she never wished to enter. Yet tonight, she walked beside Joseph through the marble entrance, her arm lightly brushing his as camera flashes blinded her. "Stay close." Joseph murmured, his voice low enough for her to hear. The words were simple, but the command beneath them was undeniable. Charlotte wore a gown of midnight blue chosen by Mrs. Hall's personal stylist. It clung to her slender frame, shimmering under the lights, her hair swept into an elegant knot that made her look like someone she barely recognized. The whispers began instantly. "Who is she?" The woman on his arm. "She can't be." A therapist. Impossible. The air thickened with envy and scorn, but Joseph's presence silenced most. He guided her through the glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos as though she were untouchable. Yet Charlotte felt every gaze like knives against her skin. The evening began with speeches, polite laughter, a ballet performance, and an endless circulation of champagne. Charlotte stayed near Joseph, answering politely when spoken to, but mostly she observed how easily he dominated a room, how even seasoned tycoons bent under the weight of his voice. Then came Clarissa Vale. She approached with the elegance of a queen, her emerald gown trailing behind her like a serpent's tail. A diamond necklace glittered at her throat, but her eyes glittered sharply. "Joseph," she greeted sweetly, kissing the air near his cheek. "You never told me you were bringing company." Her gaze slid to Charlotte, and though her smile remained, her voice dripped with venom. "Miss Lopez. How quickly you've risen, from hospital corridors to the most coveted arm in New York. Remarkable." Charlotte forced her lips into a polite curve. "It's only work, Miss Vale. Nothing remarkable about doing one's job." Clarissa laughed lightly. "Of course. A job. How convenient." Joseph's eyes darkened. "Clarissa." The single word was a warning, but Clarissa only inclined her head as though amused. She glided away, leaving the sting of her words behind. Charlotte exhaled slowly. She hated how her chest tightened and how these women reduced her worth with a single sentence. But worse was yet to come. The orchestra shifted into a slower melody. Servers passed through with silver trays. Charlotte had just stepped toward a quieter corner when a champagne glass tipped, spilling golden liquid across her gown. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," a voice exclaimed. Charlotte turned, heart sinking. Amelia Stone. Amelia's wide-eyed innocence was a mask stretched thin over malice. She sweetly said, "I didn't see you there," dabbing Charlotte's dress with a napkin that only worsened the stain. "Oh dear, and such an expensive gown, though I suppose it's borrowed." The guests nearby chuckled behind their glasses. Charlotte stiffened. "Please leave me alone, Amelia." But Amelia leaned closer, her whisper laced with poison. "You don't belong here. Marcus is watching, you know. He sees how ridiculous you look, clinging to Joseph Hall like some charity case." Charlotte's chest burned. She tried to step away, but Amelia's voice rose loud enough for others to hear. "Tell me, Miss Lopez, do you ever wonder what people say behind your back? That you seduced Mr. Hall? That you're just another pretty face hoping to climb out of the gutter? Shall I tell them about the baby you failed to save? About the husband you couldn't keep?" Gasps fluttered around them. Heads turned. The music seemed to falter. Charlotte's face drained of color. The humiliation was a blade pressed against her throat. Amelia smiled triumphantly, her voice sweet as sugar. "Go on, Charlotte. Defend yourself. Or you can't." Charlotte's lips parted, but no sound came. Every eye in the room was on her judgment, heavy, cruel. And then enough. The voice cut through the gala like thunder. Joseph Hall. He stepped forward, his expression carved in steel, his blue eyes blazing with a fury that silenced even the orchestra. He placed himself between Charlotte and Amelia, his hand firm on Charlotte's arm. "You dare," he said, softly, dangerously, "to humiliate a woman under my protection." Amelia faltered. "Mr. Hall, you only revealed your own ignorance." Joseph interrupted, his voice low, but carrying to every corner of the hall. Charlotte Lopez is not a guest here. She is not an intruder. She is mine. And anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. The room gasped. Charlotte froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. Joseph's gaze swept across the guests, icy and merciless. I do not repeat myself. Remember it well. The silence was absolute. Amelia's face blanched. Marcus moved to pull her back, but not before Joseph's final words struck like a blade. Leave, both of you. The Stones are no longer welcome at my table. Gasps rippled again. To be exiled from Joseph Hall's circle was a death sentence in their world. Amelia stammered, but Marcus dragged her away, his face tight with rage and shame. When they were gone, Joseph turned back to Charlotte. His hand was still on her arm, his grip firm, grounding. Are you hurt? He asked softly, low enough only she could hear. Charlotte shook her head, but her voice trembled. You shouldn't have done that. You've made me a bigger target. Joseph's eyes softened, though his tone remained firm. Let them aim. They'll find the cost too high. Her chest tightened. She wanted to pull away to protect herself from the dangerous warmth building between them. Yet part of her ached to lean closer to let his shield be hers. The gala continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The whispers now carried awe instead of mockery. Everywhere Charlotte walked, people stepped aside, cautious, respectful. But she felt no triumph, only the heavy weight of Joseph's words. She is mine. Back in her suite, she stared at her reflection in the mirror that night. Her hair was undone. The stained gown had been replaced, but her mind was stormy. Joseph Hall had claimed her before the world, not as a therapist, not as an employee, as his. And though her heart trembled at the memory, fear whispered too, because claims came with chains, and she wasn't sure she could survive being bound to a man like him. Meanwhile, Clarissa Vale poured herself a glass of wine in a private lounge above the gala floor. Amelia sat across from her, shaking with fury. He humiliated me, Amelia hissed. He destroyed us. Clarissa's smile was slow, venomous. Oh, my dear, Joseph Hall may have claimed her tonight, but men like him, they never keep their toys for long. Amelia's hands clenched. Then we make sure she breaks before he tires of her. Clarissa raised her glass to her downfall. Crystal clinked. The pact was sealed. And below, amidst the fading music and glittering lights, Charlotte Lopez lay awake in the mansion now, both her sanctuary and prison. Unaware of how many shadows had begun to move against her. Unaware that Joseph Hall himself, standing alone in his study, stared into the night and whispered her name like a vow. The mansion had returned to silence after the gala, yet for Charlotte Lopez, the echoes of Joseph Hall's voice still lingered. She is mine. The words had been a shield, a claim, a chain. They replayed in her mind as she lay awake in her suite, staring into the dark ceiling. Every fiber of her being wanted to reject them, to push back against the dangerous gravity of his world. And yet when she closed her eyes, she could still feel the heat of his hand on her arm, the unwavering steadiness of his presence. When the entire room had turned against her, it terrified her, because she knew if she allowed herself to lean into him, she might never be able to stand alone again. The following morning, the mansion felt different. Staff bowed lower, whispered more softly when she passed. She was no longer simply the therapist. She was the woman Joseph Hall had defended in public. And in their world, that meant untouchable, or so it seemed. Charlotte understood enough to know power attracted enemies. She had seen the look in Clarissa Vale's eyes, the venom in Amelia Stone's smile. Protection from Joseph was her shield, and the reason daggers were now pointed at her back. Still, she continued her work. Mrs. Hall had grown fond of her, calling her mi niña, in a gentle Spanish lilt, reaching for her hand during therapy sessions. The older woman had sharp instincts. More than once, she studied Charlotte with a knowing gaze, as if she could see straight into her heart. "You soften him?" Mrs. Hall murmured one afternoon after Charlotte had finished a session. Charlotte blinked. "Excuse me." "My grandson." "Joseph. He is a fortress, but I see the cracks when you are near. He breathes differently around you." Charlotte's heart stumbled. "Mrs. Hall, I think you're mistaken. He is my employer. Nothing more." The older woman smiled faintly, her wrinkled fingers patting Charlotte's arm. "Even the strongest fortress longs for warmth, child. Remember that." That night, Charlotte wandered into the library again. The shelves had become her sanctuary, where whispers of betrayal could not reach her. She was reaching for a book when she heard the door open. Joseph. He entered without a word, his suit jacket undone, his tie loosened. For once, he did not look like the ruthless man the world feared. He looked tired. She hesitated. "Long day." His eyes lifted to hers, sharp, but softened by exhaustion. "Every day is long." He poured himself a scotch, the amber liquid catching the light. Then, to her surprise, he poured a second glass and placed it in her hand. "Sit." It wasn't a command this time, more like an invitation. They sat opposite each other, the fire crackling quietly between them. For a while, neither spoke. Charlotte sipped carefully, the burn of the alcohol warming her chest. Finally, she asked softly, "Why me? Of all those women and candidates, why did you choose me?" Joseph's gaze lingered on the flames. "Because you didn't try to impress me. You weren't afraid to stand in your truth. Everyone else wore masks. You didn't." Her throat tightened. "And yet, being near you forces me to wear one every day." His eyes flicked toward her, then something raw flashing in their depths. For a moment he looked as though he wanted to say something dangerous or true. But instead, he drank deeply, silencing it. Charlotte set down her glass. "People think you're unbreakable, but no one is." "What are you hiding, Joseph?" The question hung between them. She saw hesitation in him for the first time, a shadow of something he did not allow the world to see. "Some truths," he said at last, voice low, "are better left buried." And then he rose, leaving her with more questions than answers. The next day, Charlotte accompanied Joseph to Hall Global headquarters for the first time. The skyscraper was a glass and steel monument piercing the clouds like a blade. Inside, power hummed in every corner. Employees froze when Joseph passed, bowing their heads, their fear palpable. Charlotte stayed close, silent, feeling the weight of every stare. In the boardroom, she was seated quietly at the edge, while Joseph commanded the table. His voice was firm, precise, lethal. He spoke of numbers, contracts, strategies, yet the way he bent the most arrogant men into silence was almost terrifying. But not everyone was silent. Clarissa Vale was there, her smile sharp as she leaned toward Joseph. She had joined Hall Global as a strategic partner, though Charlotte suspected her ambitions reached far beyond business. Joseph. Clarissa purred. "There are concerns about recent decisions. Some shareholders feel your distractions could endanger the company." The word distractions was pointed out. Her gaze flicked toward Charlotte. Charlotte's chest tightened. Joseph's eyes narrowed. "My decisions are not up for debate." "Of course not," Clarissa said smoothly. "But perception matters, and the perception is dangerous." Joseph's gaze sliced across the table. "Anyone foolish enough to mistake loyalty for weakness will regret it." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Clarissa only smiled as though she had achieved her goal, planting doubt-feeding whispers. Charlotte felt the daggers of envy from every direction. Later, as they left the building, Charlotte finally spoke. "She's trying to destroy me." Joseph glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Clarissa's been trying to destroy everyone for years. Don't let her win." "But she's right," Charlotte whispered. "I am a weakness. People think I don't belong by your side." Joseph stopped abruptly, turning to face her. His eyes burned with intensity. "Do I care what people think?" She froze under his gaze. He said, "I built this empire because I do not bend to anyone." Voice low, but fierce. "Do not ever call yourself my weakness, Charlotte. You are the reason I stand taller." Her heart slammed against her ribs. The world blurred. She wanted to argue, to reject the dangerous warmth in his words, but she couldn't. Not when he looked at her like that. That evening, she returned to the mansion shaken. She entered her suite to find a small package on her table. Inside was a dress silk, elegant crimson like flame. No note, no signature. But she knew. Joseph. She pressed the fabric to her chest, torn between gratitude and fear. He was pulling her deeper into his world, and she was powerless to stop it. Meanwhile, Clarissa Vale and Amelia Stone once more sat together in a penthouse across the city. "You saw how he defended her again," Amelia hissed. "He treats her like she matters." Clarissa's smile was venomous. "Then we make her matter less. We'll cut her reputation until even Joseph cannot protect her." Amelia leaned forward. "And if that fails, then we remind her where she came from," Clarissa replied. "We'll make her past bleed into his perfect empire." They clinked glasses, their alliance sealed tighter, their shadows stretching toward the Hall mansion. That night, Charlotte wandered into the library again, unable to sleep. To her surprise, Joseph was already seated in silence, the firelight flickering across his face. This time he did not look powerful. He looked alone. She hesitated. "Joseph." His eyes lifted slowly, weary. For a long moment neither spoke. Then he whispered words she never expected. "Do you ever wonder," he said, "what it costs to have everything?" Her breath caught. The vulnerability in his voice was raw, aching. Charlotte moved closer, her heart trembling. "What does it cost?" His jaw tightened. "Everything that matters." The silence was heavy, intimate. She wanted to reach for him to offer comfort, but she stopped, afraid of what it would mean. And yet, as their eyes locked across the firelight, she realized Joseph Hall was not unbreakable. He was human, and perhaps dangerously, heartbreakingly hers. The mansion's vast corridors had grown familiar to Charlotte Lopez, yet never comfortable. Each polished marble floor, each gilded frame seemed to remind her she was a guest in a world not her own. But in the quiet hours of night, when the chandeliers had gone dark and the city's hum was far away, she often thought of Joseph Hall, not the billionaire, not the ruthless CEO, but the man who sometimes looked unbearably lonely before the fire. Her heart betrayed her, because she had begun to feel something she could neither deny nor name. It began with the most minor things. Joseph's gaze softened imperceptibly when she entered a room. The way he listened, really listened when she spoke, even if her words held no consequence for his empire. The way he paused in the middle of signing contracts, if she so much as brushed her injured hand. Charlotte told herself it was nothing. Gratitude, perhaps. A temporary attachment born from protection. But deep down, she knew better. She was falling. The moment of revelation came unexpectedly. That afternoon, Joseph had invited her to accompany him to a charity event hosted by Hall Global. It was meant to be simple, a fundraiser for medical research, an elegant gathering at a glass-walled venue overlooking the Hudson. Charlotte wore a gown of ivory silk, modest yet striking, chosen with Mrs. Hall's help. She had told herself she was only there professionally, but her reflection in the mirror had whispered otherwise. Joseph arrived at her suite to escort her. For once, he had abandoned his icy black suits. He wore midnight blue, perfectly tailored, and his hair was brushed back with a careless touch that made him look younger and less untouchable. For a long second he looked at her. "You're beautiful," he said quietly. Charlotte's breath caught. He rarely gave compliments. His words were weapons precise and calculated. But now his voice carried no calculation, only truth. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to meet his eyes. The event glittered with wealth. Crystal chandeliers, reflected against glass walls, casting golden light over the city beyond. Guests mingled laughter and polite conversations swirling like champagne bubbles. Charlotte stayed near Joseph, answering questions politely and smiling when addressed. She felt out of place, but his presence was an anchor. Until disaster struck. It happened in an instant. A waiter moving too quickly collided with another server. A tray of glassware crashed to the floor. Standing near the chaos, Charlotte instinctively moved to help steady one of the servers. And then she saw it. A shard of glass, large, sharp, flying toward her. She froze. Before she could react, a force slammed into her, pulling her out of harm's way. Joseph. He had crossed the space between them in a heartbeat, shielding her with his body. The shard shattered harmlessly against the floor, inches from where she had stood. Gasps rippled through the room. Guests whispered. But Charlotte heard none of it. All she could hear was the pounding of her heart pressed against Joseph's chest as he held her, his arms iron-strong, unyielding. For a moment the world ceased to exist. There was only his scent, clean sharp with a hint of scotch, and the terrifying realization of how desperately he had moved to protect her. "Are you hurt?" His voice was raw, almost frantic as he pulled back to search her face. Charlotte shook her head, trembling. "No, I'm fine." But Joseph didn't release her immediately. His hand lingered at her waist, his eyes burning with something fierce, something unspoken. It was not the look of a man protecting an employee. It was the look of a man afraid of losing something, someone he could not bear to lose. Later, after the incident had been smoothed over and the guests returned to their champagne, Charlotte found herself on the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her heated skin. Joseph joined her, silent for a long while. The city stretched out below them, a sea of lights. He said, "You shouldn't have been standing so close," his tone sharper than he intended. Charlotte turned to him, her eyes steady. "And you shouldn't have risked yourself for me." His jaw tightened. "I didn't think. I just moved." Her breath caught. The admission was bare, stripped of the control he always wielded so carefully. "Why, Joseph?" she whispered. His gaze met hers, unflinching. For a moment, it seemed he might confess something irrevocable. But then, with visible effort, he looked away. "Because I protect what's mine," he said at last, his voice hardening again. Charlotte's chest ached. The words that should have angered her instead set her heart racing. She wanted to deny it, to reject the dangerous pull between them. But she couldn't. Not anymore. Yet even as her feelings deepened, shadows moved against her. Clarissa Vale had not been idle. She had whispered to shareholders, hinted to journalists, spread the poison of doubt with a practiced smile. Amelia Stone, seething from her public humiliation, had joined her. Together they crafted their trap. It began with whispers in glossy magazines. Headlines question Charlotte's past, and articles suggest she had seduced Joseph Hall for wealth. Photos of her entering and leaving the mansion were twisted into salacious narratives. Then came the cruelest blow, an anonymous tip leaked to the press. Charlotte's disciplinary record from the hospital, the tragedy of the infant she could not save, spun as proof of incompetence, even malice. By the time Charlotte saw the articles, the damage was done. Her hands shook as she held the magazine. Her face stared back at her, labeled with words like fraud and gold digger. The story of that night at the hospital, her greatest wound, exposed and twisted for the world's amusement. She couldn't breathe. Joseph found her in the library, the magazine crumpled in her trembling hands. Her eyes lifted to his wide with pain. "They've destroyed me." His jaw clenched as he took the magazine, scanning the venomous words. Fury radiated from him, cold and lethal. "I'll shut them down," he said, his voice like steel. "Every outlet, every journalist, anyone who breathes a word against you will regret it." Charlotte shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "You can't fight the whole world, Joseph. Not for me." He moved closer, his hand cupping her face, his touch startlingly gentle. "Watch me." Her breath hitched. His eyes blazed fierce and unyielding. For the first time, she understood the full force of Joseph Hall's power and the terrifying depth of his care. It wasn't just protection anymore. It was something more profound, something she dared not name. That night, Charlotte lay awake, torn between fear and longing. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, and yet she had never felt so wanted. Outside her window, the city whispered of scandal, but inside the mansion, a storm brewed with Joseph Hall at its center. And Charlotte knew whatever lay ahead, her heart was already his, even if it destroyed her. The desert city of Las Vegas sparkled like a jewel cast upon the sand. The Strip was ablaze with neon by night, a river of lights flowing endlessly beneath the desert sky. However, even Vegas seemed dim tonight, compared to the spectacle Joseph Hall had orchestrated. Charlotte Lopez stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse suite, staring out at the city below. Her reflection shimmered against the glass, a woman in a crimson gown, her hair swept into soft waves, her eyes shadowed with doubt. She had not wanted this trip. The whispers in New York still followed her, her name stained across tabloids, her past twisted into a weapon. Accepting Joseph's protection had only deepened the rumors, and yet she was flown across the country in his private jet, standing in a hotel suite that cost more per night than she had earned in years of medical practice. Because Joseph had insisted, and when Joseph Hall insisted, the world obeyed. The night was a dream dressed in silk and gold. The rooftop garden of the Bellagio had been transformed into a wonderland of roses, crimson ivory blush, flown in from Italy that very morning. Strings of lights cascaded overhead, twinkling like stars. A grand piano gleamed beneath the canopy, where a world-renowned pianist played melodies that seemed pulled from the depths of longing. Guests poured in, the elite of America and beyond. Senators, CEOs, Hollywood stars, photographers lined the edges, lenses hungry for the spectacle. At the center of it all stood Joseph Hall. He was devastating in his tailored black tuxedo, a scarlet rose pinned to his lapel. But the suit did not make the world hush when he stepped forward. It was his presence, the magnetic force that bent every eye and breath toward him. And then there was Charlotte. The crowd parted like the sea when she descended the marble steps, escorted by Joseph himself. Whispers rippled about her beauty, about her audacity, about how she had bewitched the untouchable Joseph Hall. Charlotte felt her cheeks burn, but Joseph's hand on hers was steady, commanding. His gaze never wavered from her, as though the entire world had vanished, leaving only her reflection in his eyes. The evening unfolded with calculated perfection. Speeches, laughter, glasses clinking. Musicians played, dancers performed. The sky above erupted with fireworks, timed with the orchestra's crescendo. And then, as the final spark fell, Joseph turned to Charlotte. The world stilled. A hush swept over the rooftop as he took her hand. "Charlotte Lopez." His voice carried across the night, deep and resonant. "From the moment you walked into my life, you challenged me. You defied me. You reminded me what it means to feel alive. And though the world may call you unworthy, know this." His eyes burned into hers, fierce, unyielding. "To me, you are everything." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Joseph sank to one knee. A diamond glistened in his hand, massive, flawless, a stone, cut to capture every shard of light. "Marry me," he said. "Be mine not by contract or protection, but by choice. Tonight, tomorrow, forever." Charlotte's breath caught. Her vision blurred. The crowd leaned in hungry for her answer. For a heartbeat she could not speak. Her heart warred between fear and longing. But when her eyes met Joseph's, all walls crumbled. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling but certain. Joseph slid the ring onto her finger. Applause thundered. Fireworks blazed once more. And in that moment, with his lips brushing hers under the desert sky, Charlotte felt the world's weight fall away. She was his, and terrifyingly, he was hers. But even in paradise, shadows lingered. Unseen by most, Clarissa Vale and Amelia Stone watched from the rooftop's edge, their smiles brittle with venom. "So the little bird thinks she's a phoenix now," Clarissa murmured, her eyes narrowing. Amelia's nails dug into her champagne glass. "He humiliated me. He destroyed Marcus. And now he dares to raise her above us. I won't let this stand." Clarissa's lips curved. "Then tonight is the night we clip her wings." The attack was elegant, calculated. It began with murmurs seeded among the crowd, whispers of Charlotte's shameful past at the hospital. Printed dossiers slid into discreet hands, photographs of Charlotte in her white coat, paired with headlines of failure. Then a voice rose, Amelia's, trembling with feigned outrage. "How can you all celebrate this?" she cried, stepping into the circle. Her gown glittered, her face a mask of wounded righteousness. "How can Joseph Hall marry a woman who killed my child?" Gasps erupted. Cameras whirred. Charlotte froze, her face draining of color. Amelia's voice broke, but her words were sharpened like knives. "She was the doctor that night. She let my baby die. And now she stands here pretending to be worthy of love, this family, and all of you. She is a murderer wearing silk." The crowd exploded into whispers, scandal igniting like wildfire. Charlotte's knees weakened. The wound of that night, the one she had buried so deep, ripped open under the cruel gaze of hundreds. Her lips parted, but no words came. Then Joseph's hand closed around hers. "Enough." His voice boomed thunder against the chaos. The rooftop fell silent. He stepped forward, placing himself before Charlotte, his gaze sweeping the crowd with icy fire. "You speak of her past as though it condemns her. Let me make this clear. Charlotte Lopez saved lives that night. She fought for hours against impossible odds. The child was gone long before it reached her hands. The only reason Amelia Stone still breathes is because of Charlotte." Amelia faltered, but Joseph's words cut sharper than any blade. "You dare call her a murderer? Then look at me and say I am a fool. Because tonight I choose her not despite her past, but because of it. Because she is stronger than any of you. Because she is worthy of love, of loyalty, of forever." Silence fell heavily. Cameras clicked. The crowd, stunned, shifted from scandal to awe. Charlotte's eyes burned with tears. Joseph turned back to her, his voice soft, now meant only for her. "They can call you what they want. But to me, you are everything." And as he kissed her once more, sealing the moment with unshakable defiance, Charlotte knew no force, not Clarissa Amelia, or the weight of the world could undo what had been forged tonight. But Clarissa was not finished. As the applause rose again, she slipped into the shadows, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes," she whispered to an unseen ally. Begin the next move. We will break her with blood if we cannot break her with scandal. And beneath the glittering lights of Las Vegas, as Charlotte clung to Joseph's hand, unaware of the storm gathering, fate prepared its next cruel test. The night in Las Vegas had ended in a blaze of fireworks and whispered scandal, but silence weighed heavily on Charlotte Lopez's heart by dawn. She sat at the edge of the hotel bed, the diamond Joseph had placed on her finger, gleaming faintly in the pale morning light. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. She traced the ring absently, her mind tangled in doubt. Yes, Joseph had shielded her before the world had silenced Amelia's venom with words sharper than steel. But Charlotte knew whispers lingered, and until she proved herself, until she reclaimed the part of her that had been stolen the night she lost her last patient, her place in Joseph's world would always be fragile. The healer in her was restless. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Hall Global hosted a private summit in Las Vegas, a gathering of tycoons and political leaders from across the globe. Joseph, as always, was at the center of it, commanding the room with his effortless authority. Charlotte attended quietly at his side, her role undefined yet undeniable. The evening began smoothly, presentations, speeches, polite banter, until a sudden cry shattered the rhythm. "Someone help! He's collapsing!" All eyes turned. At the center of the banquet hall, Senator Whitmore, an elder statesman with influence spanning continents, clutched his chest and fell against his chair. His face blanched, his breath shallow. Panic erupted. Guests screamed, servers rushed, security moved in. But Charlotte was already moving. "Clear the space." She commanded, her voice ringing with an authority born not from power, but from purpose. "Give me room." The crowd parted in stunned silence as she knelt beside the senator. Her hands trembled for only a heartbeat before instinct took over. Pulse weak, breathing irregular, she muttered, slipping back into the medicine rhythm, as if she had never left. "He's in cardiac arrest. Call for an ambulance now." Joseph was at her side instantly, his hand steady on her shoulder. "What do you need?" "Flat surface," she said quickly. And silence. Everyone back. Without hesitation, Joseph barked the order. The room fell silent. Power bent to his command, but Charlotte was the true center at that moment. She placed her hands on the senator's chest. 1, 2, 3. Her voice kept rhythm as she performed compressions, her entire body moving with controlled force. Sweat glistened on her brow, her gown forgotten, her reputation forgotten. There was only the fragile thread of life beneath her hands. "Breathe for me," she whispered. "Come back." Minutes stretched into eternity. The senator's pulse fluttered, vanished, and returned faintly. Guests held their breath. Cameras captured every movement, every desperate push of her palms. And then, a cough, a gasp. The senator's chest rose, air filling his lungs once more. "He's back!" Charlotte breathed, her voice breaking. Relief flooded her as the medics finally arrived, rushing to take over. Applause erupted, spontaneous, thunderous. But Charlotte barely heard it. Her arms ached, her hands shook, yet she felt alive, more alive than she had in months. She had saved him. Not as Joseph Hall's fiancée, not as a pawn in anyone's scheme. As Dr. Charlotte Lopez, the aftermath was swift and merciless, this time in her favor. By morning, headlines had shifted, from scandal to savior. Charlotte Lopez rescues Senator Whitmore. The hand that heals Joseph Hall's fiancée proves her worth. Videos of her calm authority, her relentless compressions, her whispered plea for life, had gone viral. The same tabloids that once branded her a murderer now call her a miracle worker. The narrative had turned, and with it the balance of power. Clarissa Vale watched the news in seething silence. Amelia Stone threw her phone across the room, her face twisted in rage. "She was supposed to be ruined," Amelia hissed. "Instead, she's a hero." Clarissa's smile was brittle, but her voice held steel. "Heroes fall hardest. Let her bask in their adoration. The higher she climbs, the greater her fall will be." But even Clarissa knew the tide had shifted. Charlotte Lopez was no longer prey. For Charlotte, however, the shift was not about headlines. It was about the spark she felt reignite within her chest. That night back in the suite, she stared at her hands. The same hands she once feared were cursed. The same hands that had been called killers. They had saved a life. Tears blurred her vision as Joseph entered quietly. He found her sitting by the window, the city lights spilling over her. "You were magnificent," he said. She looked up at him, her throat tight. "I thought I had lost it, the part of me that mattered most. But tonight, it came back." Joseph crossed the room, kneeling before her, in an uncharacteristic gesture that stole her breath. He took her trembling hands in his, lifting them to his lips. "These hands were never cursed," he said softly. "They were made to heal. And no matter what the world says, I will never let you forget that." Her tears spilled over. She wanted to speak, thank him, and tell him how deeply his words pierced her heart. But no words came. So instead, she let herself lean into him, her forehead resting against his, her breath mingling with his own. For the first time, she did not resist the truth that had been building between them. She loved him, and it terrified her. The following days were a whirlwind. Offers poured in from hospitals, research institutions, and global charities, all eager to claim Charlotte as their face. But she refused them all. "I don't need fame," she told Joseph one evening as they shared quiet wine on the balcony. "I only need to know I can still do what I was meant to do." Joseph studied her, his gaze intense, yet gentle. "And what do you think you were meant to do, Charlotte?" She met his eyes, her voice steady. "To heal. Not just bodies, but hearts too." Something unguarded flickered in his expression for a moment, a longing he could not mask. "Then perhaps," he murmured, "you were meant to heal me." Her chest tightened. She wanted to deny it to protect herself, but deep down she knew she already had. Meanwhile, Clarissa and Amelia's schemes began to crumble. Senator Whitmore, grateful for his life, publicly denounced the slander against Charlotte. Shareholders who had once doubted Joseph's fiancée now praised her as an asset to Hall Global's reputation. Invitations poured in for the couple not to question, but to celebrate. Clarissa's influence waned, and Amelia's name became synonymous with venom. Yet their hatred only sharpened. "This isn't over," Clarissa vowed in the shadows of her penthouse. "We will strike at her heart, if we cannot ruin her reputation. Let us see how strong Joseph Hall truly is, when love becomes his weakness." But for one fleeting moment, Charlotte knew peace. That night, as the city lights faded and the desert stars returned, she lay in Joseph's arms, her head resting against his chest. His heartbeat was steady grounding. "I don't belong in your world," she whispered. He kissed her hair, his voice fierce yet tender. "Then I'll build a new world where you do." Her eyes closed, her heart surrendering. For the first time in years, she slept without nightmares, unaware that the shadows she thought defeated were already gathering again, unaware that the next test would demand not just her hands, but her very heart. The world had begun to shift in Charlotte Lopez's favor. She had saved Senator Whitmore, redeemed her name, and slowly reclaimed the identity she thought she had lost forever. But in Joseph Hall's world, peace was only ever an illusion. Because shadows never disappeared, they waited. And Clarissa Vale knew how to wait better than anyone. It happened on a night meant for celebration. Hall Global had organized a gala in New York to honor international partnerships. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers. The music flowed and Charlotte stood at Joseph's side, her crimson gown flowing like firelight. Cameras adored her, reporters whispered about her transformation from scandal to savior. But in the shadows of the balcony above, Clarissa and Amelia watched, their expressions sharp with venom. "She wears the crown too easily," Amelia whispered, clutching her champagne. "She thinks she belongs here." Clarissa's smile was cold. "Then tonight we show her the price of stealing what isn't hers." The moment struck with cruel precision. Joseph excused himself to speak with investors when Charlotte moved toward the refreshment table. She never saw Amelia approach until the champagne spilled across her gown. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Amelia said sweetly, her voice pitched for the nearest cameras. "Clumsy me. It must be hard for you to pretend to be Joseph Hall's equal when you're nothing more than a nursemaid who failed her patients." Gasps rippled through those nearby. The words were deliberate, sharp enough to reopen old wounds. Charlotte's chest tightened, but she lifted her chin. "I don't pretend," she said calmly, though her heart pounded. "I know who I am, and I don't need your approval." Amelia's smile faltered. For a moment, Charlotte thought she had won, but then Clarissa's voice rang out, carrying across the hall like poison. "Do you all know who she really is?" Clarissa called, her heels clicking as she descended the staircase. All eyes turned. Charlotte Lopez, the woman who killed a child in her care. A woman who hides behind Joseph Hall's wealth because she cannot stand on her own. And tonight, she gestured dramatically, "We have proof." Screens flickered to life across the ballroom. A video played edited footage from the hospital that night, spliced to make Charlotte appear negligent, even cruel. Gasps filled the air as images twisted her tragedy into a crime. Charlotte's blood ran cold. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This isn't the truth." But the crowd didn't hear her. They heard Clarissa's voice, velvet and venom. "This is the woman Joseph Hall calls his future. Tell me, is she worthy?" The room buzzed with doubt, with whispers. Charlotte stood frozen, the weight of every stare crushing her. She could barely breathe. And then Joseph's voice thundered through the hall. "Enough!" He strode back into the ballroom like a storm, his presence commanding instant silence. His eyes burned with fury as he scanned the crowd, then locked on Clarissa. "You dare!" Clarissa's mask faltered, but she lifted her chin. "The world deserves to know." Joseph's lips curved into something dangerous. "Then let them know the truth." He signaled, and a new feed replaced the doctored footage within seconds. The unedited version. It showed Charlotte's desperate fight to save both mother and child. Her trembling hands covered in blood, her face carved with grief when the infant's pulse never returned. And the final words of the attending physician: "The child was gone before arrival." Dr. Lopez saved the mother. Without her, both would have died. Silence. Every lie, every whisper shattered beneath the weight of truth. Charlotte's breath broke, tears welling. She hadn't known Joseph had secured this footage. He hadn't told her. "Do you see?" Joseph's voice rang across the hall, low and lethal. "This woman, my woman, is not a failure. She is a fighter. And if any of you dare to slander her again, know that I will dismantle your fortune, your legacy, and your name until nothing remains." No one dared speak. Cameras caught every word, every flicker of fire in his eyes. And then, before the stunned crowd, Joseph turned to Charlotte. He said softly that "you once asked me why I protect you." Though the microphones carried his words to all. "It's not because you are weak. It's because I love you, and I will fight the whole world if I must, so long as you are beside me." Her heart shattered and healed all at once. Tears spilled freely as he pulled her close, kissing her under the gaze of hundreds, defying every shadow. The ballroom erupted, not in scandal, but in applause. Charlotte had been vindicated, and together they had silenced the darkness. But victory carried its price. Clarissa and Amelia were escorted from the hall, their protests drowned by disdain. Overnight, their names became synonymous with deceit. Investors abandoned Clarissa's ventures, and Amelia's social circle crumbled. For Joseph and Charlotte, however, the night marked a turning point. Later in the suite's quiet, Charlotte sat by the window, her hands trembling. "You knew," she whispered. "You had the proof all along." Joseph stepped behind her, resting his hands on her shoulders. "I wanted you to stand on your own first, to know that your strength didn't depend on me. But when they struck again, I couldn't stay silent." She turned her eyes, searching his. "You said you loved me in front of everyone." His expression softened. "I don't take words lightly, Charlotte. When I say I love you, it means forever." Her heart swelled, her fears melting in the fire of his gaze. Slowly she rose, placing her hands on his chest. "Then I'll fight for us too," she said, "no matter what comes." He kissed her fierce and tender, sealing a promise and a future. And though the world outside still bristled with envy for that night, they were untouchable. Once broken and shamed, Charlotte Lopez now stood as the woman who had tamed Joseph Hall's heart. And Joseph Hall, the untouchable billionaire, had revealed himself not as a fortress, but as a man who had finally found his home. If you find the story of Charlotte and Joseph touching your heart, leave a comment about the most impressive moment. Don't forget to support this work and follow the channel to watch the next dramatic chapters where love and fate continue to challenge them.